all happy?
Yes.
Are we ready?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to start bang on time. So first of all, thank you very much, everybody, for coming along to this session. Usually the last session, like, oh, is this a graveyard shift? Are we even going to have an audience? But I think we can safely say that we've got such a selection of panelists, we couldn't not have an audience. So what we're going to be discussing today is the next steps for light rail systems and how we can make light rail more appealing. In a moment, I'm going to open it to the panelists, I'm going to introduce themselves, and what I'll ask you to do is, describe the systems that you're in charge of, let's say. But I will warn you, I do like audience participation, so for the last 10, 15 minutes or so, I will be inviting questions from the floor, and if I don't get questions, I will pick on people. I want this to be something really, really interactive, because this really is something that touches all of us in our everyday lives as well as our professional lives. So we'll start left to right as a safe kid. What's your name and where do you come from? That's the third time I've used that point today. But you can also describe as well that the systems you're representing or your part in the system, because we do have supply chain represented here as well, which I think is really, really important element to this discussion. So over to you, Sophie.
So I'm Sophie Allison. I'm the Managing Director for West Midlands Metro. So we operate our tram service between Wolverhampton and Birmingham City Centre, and we'll soon be opening to Dudley later on this year. So we're expanding, and also to the east of Birmingham we're expanding as well. Eventually we'll serve HS2 when that's built. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm Nicola Small. I'm the Very Light Rail Programme Director. I work for both Coventry City Council and Transport for West Midlands. I'm pleased that I have some of the team in the audience today, our vehicle engineering team. So
give us a wave. Let's know who you are. Thank you.
What we're doing is Coventry-born idea is about innovating a shallow track system and a smaller, lightweight vehicle to drive down the cost of fixed infrastructure public transport for small to medium-sized cities like Coventry. What we've found is that the track is outperforming expectations. So we now have a track form product that we're hoping to work with Midland Metro and other conventional tram operators in the future to trial innovation and our shallow track.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'm Colin Rowcliffe. I work for Siemens Mobility, and I'm the director responsible for light rail, amongst a few other things. I think my focus area is really, we lead on sort of being proven technology partners around Europe, the Middle East and Africa, typically around light rail and the projects that we deliver. What that sort of leads to is all of our off-site sort of test environments. So we focus on that ability to deliver those projects, but then also to service those projects once they're in operation. And obviously with the rapid sort of changes in technology, the demands of cyber, how we support those projects in live operational service, whether that be light rail, mass transit and even mainline.
Thank you. And Dan.
Good afternoon. I'm Dan Tipper, Chief Infrastructure Officer for Transport for Wales. So all things asset management, project delivery, etc. For TFW comes under me. We are in the final stages of a transformation programme to bring South Wales Metro to the valleys. So that's an increase in frequency, massive electrification programme, signalling upgrades, track upgrades, etc. And part of that is we have a tram train fleet who are going to operate on the heavy rail network, but also then on the tramway network in and around Cardiff city centre. And in terms of the progress on that, the tram trains will be in service, fingers crossed, etc., touch wood, etc., very shortly. And the first construction part of the Crossrail section, as we call it, the tramway through Cardiff, is towards the end of this year. So reasonably mature on that.
Thank you. I think none of us are blind to the fact that it's a really exciting moment right now in terms of that light rail market. We've got the whole devolution conversation going on. There's the settlement funds that are arriving in and around the combined authorities. There are the future combined authorities that are going to emerge. And then obviously there's national devolution in your respect. So it's really interesting and exciting time for us. I think it's safe to say respectively, you're at very different stages of those journeys as well. So I'm going to come to Nicola first. In fact, we all had prep calls before today. And one of the really lovely things that came out from, we met, didn't we, at UK Rail, you describe yourselves as the wonderful contradiction that breaks the rule. You've hinted on that, but give us a little bit more about that. What is the contradiction that you're bringing to the market?
Yeah, so, I mean, we are a fixed infrastructure, and I'm talking to an audience that knows what rail delivers for cities and towns, how it connects people, how users like to use trains and light rail. It drives modal shift. I always say most bus users are non-car owners. They can't actually afford to drive a car. They're using a bus because they have to. But when you look at rail users and light rail users, many of them have made a choice and they've left a car at home. So we know that we need that attractive, affordable, fixed rail infrastructure. And why should only the big the cities like Birmingham, Manchester, Nottingham, why should people that live in those cities be the ones that have access? What about the rest of us that live in cities like Coventry, Bristol, Leeds? There's many smaller cities that need to be able to afford fixed infrastructure. So we started on our journey back in 2017. We secured funding, and the mission was really, how do we create an affordable system that can be deployed quickly and affordably for a smaller city with a smaller population size, and have a viable business case to secure funding to deliver it. So that's where we started, and we wanted to drive down the whole cost of infrastructure. So we started with the vehicle concept, because if you look at long, heavy, they're light rail, but they're heavier than what we've created. The length and the curvature, you need to take out buildings. You've got compulsory purchase orders, and the capacity, they deliver great capacity for the big city. But again, in a smaller city, you don't necessarily need that capacity. Or you can deliver capacity with high-frequency services with a small, lightweight vehicle. So we were looking at, if it's small, lightweight, can negotiate tight corners, be retrofitted in existing streets without the compulsory purchase orders. It could be battery-operated. You wouldn't have the requirement for overhead line equipment, so you drive down that cost, and then by virtue of having a lightweight vehicle, could you have a shallower track form? So that's how the project started. And we were, disruptors in the sector. We still are, because we're still championing something that some people are unsure about. But we know that there's local interest in this, regional interest, national interest. And we often get to go out and talk to the global market about what we're doing in Coventry, because there's a gap in the market for what we're creating in the region. So we're really excited about what our product has to offer for the whole suite of public transport options that are available in the UK.
Thank you. I want to cross to you next, Dan, because we were chatting outside and you talked about how even before you started with what you're doing, you spoke to everybody else. So in terms of the research that you put into the metro system that you're bringing to bear in Wales, how has all of that informed what you're actually delivering?
Yeah, so we've talked to as many people as we possibly could to understand what issues they've had, what they do differently if they got the opportunity to start again, just learn as much as we possibly could so that we don't then repeat that as we kind of embark on the first section of tramway that we're installing. So there's probably several years, and it's continuing now, several years of engagement there. We also engage with the LRSSB to understand, what should we be doing, what direction should we be going in, what do you recommend in terms of improvements from the existing schemes that are around the UK and the world. So gather as much information as we possibly could, and then deploy that for the specific situation that we've got. We have the mindset behind what we're trying to do is that you can get on a single vehicle, let's not call it a tram or a train, you get on a single vehicle at the top of the valleys, and you can travel all the way down into Cardiff Bay, see a show at the arena, do some shopping, go to work, whatever, and you can do that in less than an hour without having to interchange. So by that, the very nature of that, without converting the entire heavy rail network to something else, you end up with this a vehicle that needs to go across the two. But what we didn't want to do is then apply all of those heavy rail standards and the costs associated with that to the tramway section, because that would be crazy. So as much knowledge as we could, incorporate that into what we're doing, and then we'll continue to, as we build more and more sections, we'll continue to evolve the thinking, we'll continue to talk to people. And the very thin foundations for the tramway, that absolutely is something we want to be pushing on. Our axle loads are a bit too high, but we need to be doing that type of thing, because the cost per kilometre is probably the most important figure of everything that we're doing, because we've got to get business cases agreed to enable us to start this work.
Thank you. And across to yourself now, Sophie. I'd say quite a different, you're much further way through developing this and growing this. Like, you're talking about the extensions now. So how has the systems journey evolved, let's say, over the years?
Yeah, just before we go on to that, I mean, some of the work, what is happening now in terms of the innovation in the space, especially what Nicola's working on, we are actually benefiting from that. So some of the new products, what they've trialled on the VLR system in Coventry, we are now trialling some of those on Metro. So, for example, encapsulation around our rail, we're trialling a product, what they used in July, to see if that could work for us. So we are really benefiting from some of these innovations, what's coming through now. But in terms of us, yes, we're further along on our journey. You know, we are now, we've been expanding over the last few years. We've expanded around to Wolverhampton rail station in the West Midlands, and we've recently extended to the east of Birmingham, and that was in April. We opened 2 new stops, and that will then continue on to serve HS2 and go on to Digbeth. So we are in a different phase in our journey, but even more exciting. You know, we've got our customer base, and we want to build and grow our network. You know, over the last few years since we've been doing our expansions, we've seen our patronage increase. We're at 9 million now in terms of our patronage numbers, which was the record for us last year. And along with that, we've had revenues growing at 7% as well, which again is positive to be able to support these expansions. But it's clearly something customers want as well. So, you know, our recent customer satisfaction survey was 93% satisfaction, which I think when it comes down to choice, and you were saying people don't have a car, I mean, my old boss said, do you know why people take the Metro? It's their least worst option, because if they had a car, they would drive. So I'm selling the least worst option, but it isn't the least worst option, actually, because people do choose, as you say, to leave the car at home and take the tram for the convenience, to get into the city centres, to get to work, and so on. So people are, and when we do our surveys, we find, you know, people do have cars, sometimes 2 in the household, but they will still choose to take the Metro. What we need to focus on is making sure we've got a reliable service, but also an affordable service. So it's making sure we can keep those costs down and offer people something which is affordable, so they do choose to do that. And there's a lot going on in ticketing and how we can do that. I think for us in the West Midlands, there'll be an opportunity when franchising comes in, because we can then do more between bus and Metro ticketing when it's under one roof. So I think that will really give us some opportunities. So there's still things, what we're doing, less in the pure innovation space, but we are always looking to see how we can make things better on the network, what we've got, how we can improve the customer experience, and how we can drive down costs and actually do things more quicker and efficiently, because one of the issues you have with an expanding network is doing the maintenance, because obviously the window of opportunity in the night, the engineering hours, seems to get shorter and shorter the further out you go, and you need to send trams out further so they go out, leave the depot earlier, and that window seems to be getting tighter. So we've got to think about things, how we can replace things quicker ways of doing things, and how we can get new products on the market which will enable us to do that.
Yeah. Well, I'll come to yourself in a minute, Colin, but a couple of things I wanted to pull out there is you've all three just talked really beautifully about the impact you're essentially having on customers' lives, and the fact that whether you don't have a car or you're making a choice, and the fact that the power of the light rail system is what it opens people up to. And then there, in terms of the innovation that, Dan, that you took so long to learn from others and take best practice, and that your innovation is actually already shaping established systems. So then to bring the supply chain element of that in, Colin, where do you see, without it being a pitch, but really honestly, how do the likes of Siemens, because you touch every single bit, you know, Siemens Mobility, you build trains, you run wires, you do everything. How do you relate very specifically to that light rail market?
Okay, thank you. I think, first of all, for us, it's about the acknowledgement about how important light rail is to mobility. So our belief is that, light rail is at the start and the end of that mobility ecosystem.
Yeah.
So the more attractive we can make light rail for our passengers and the passenger experience, the more people we get onto light rail, which in turn feeds mass transit and in turn feeds main lines. So it's fundamentally important to UK mobility, and we know how many cars, journeys it takes off the road, and it just generally makes our cities and towns more attractive places to be and to do business. That in turn with the economic growth drives that funding. I think where Siemens look at being best able to support that is with our reach. We're a global technology partner, and in the UK we've prided ourselves on being a proven technology partner and the benefits that can bring to light rail. So if we take examples from other parts of rail, when we have those long-term relationships, we can invest in things like Chippenham, which is the Siemens Rail Technology Centre, and that's 100 million we'll put into this industry where we can develop the off-site test integration facilities. It means as we build these systems as part of light rail and these ever more complex systems, we have the facilities to be able to make sure that when we bring the new technology or we're doing upgrades or we're doing renewals, we can prove that technology works and therefore it's implemented without disruption. And I think that confidence that brings. Technology's changed, and history will show that when we've built these systems, they will have a shelf life, 10, 15 years, and then we need to look at a wholesale renewal. Actually, we need to be thinking about how systems evolve and then never become fundamentally obsolete now. And that's why technology partnerships are so important. Certainly when you link in how quickly hardware becomes obsolete, the rapid sort of technology and innovation development, but also things like cybersecurity. The number of interventions that you'll have on a live operational network now are growing exponentially. We need to prove that those interventions will work, and that off-site testability and that technology partnership will give you the confidence that will happen.
Excellent. Something that's come out of all of that, and right at the beginning of this, Dan, you referred to the LRSSB, so the Light Rail Safety Standards Board. I always get my acronyms muddled up. There's so much innovation going on. There's arguably less legislation, or there's more freedom in the light rail market, and it does have that power to change socioeconomics within cities. It's opening worlds up to people. How do you do all of that really safely and sustainability whilst keeping it affordable for Joe Public?
So, safety is always a fundamental. So there are, I'm sure, across the panel, each organisation will have their own safety procedures and processes internally that they deal with. But fundamentally, there's things like CSM and law that kind of bind us. So if we kind of assume that common sense and safety is applied in all cases, what it then comes down to is how do you create the opportunity for the innovation. And to use the example on CVR transformation, so we TFW procured that as an output specification. So basically move people from there to there faster and with greater frequency. And then we let the supply chain come to us with the answers to that. And Amy, who are our delivery partners for the transformation program, came up with the smart electrification approach that we have now. Siemens doing our signalling system and so on and so on. So as a client, we can encourage and give opportunities for the suppliers to bring their best and brightest to us to solve the problems, and we create that opportunity for them to do it. And what we don't want to do then is lock it down in governance, control, etc., etc. But fundamentally, I think the minimum that we expect is everything's safe. Everything's done in a safe and sensible way, and that's why we choose, I guess, the supply chain partners we select. We choose them very carefully to make sure they have the same ethos in terms of safety, but also the same ethos in terms of innovative approach.
Thank you. Ladies.
So in terms of the safety aspects, as you say, I think what's really, I wouldn't say unique, but what's really special about the light rail is that we have UK Tram, which obviously brings together operators so we can learn from each other. And I know we've supported yourselves a lot in terms of moving to that light rail space, which is new to yourselves. And also the Light Rail Safety Standards Board, because that's where, we will look at the standards. Obviously very different to heavy rail, where it's signalled, our drivers are relying on line of sight, like driving your car, everything is in their hands. And obviously with events in over the years, we've had to continually improve, and that's what we want to, and things like the automatic speed monitoring, so the trams can brake on sharp corners, etc., or if a driver becomes incapacitated and things like that. So we've developed over the years in that space. But I think what's really key is that industry sharing of knowledge and experience, which I think is done really well at Light Rail, and definitely with UK Tram and LRSSB, and how we share information. So that to me is really important.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a non-exec director as well on UK Tram Board, and I'm really feeling the benefits of that now. I mean, it's to get embedded in the UK Tram. There are lots of groups where you can learn from others and share knowledge from what we're doing. But we are fortunate in the light rail sector that the guidance and principles aren't as stringent as in the heavy rail sector, so we can innovate. And we do follow guidance where we can, but we're trying to push the boundaries and drive down cost. So where we do deviate, we take a risk-based approach. And that's really important. We employ specialist people that have the skills and the knowledge to be able to guide us as a council as to what we can do differently to drive down the cost. So we take our experts seriously. They are knowledgeable about their particular specialist role. So obviously we've got Anthony as the chief engineer, and a guy called Chris Micallef is our track expert. And where we don't follow a principle, we'll have a risk-based approach. We'll say what we're doing differently, how we're mitigating the risk. And the great thing in Coventry is that we've got a director that has an appetite for trying in technology and taking a risk. And I do worry that one of the challenges for the sector is, where are those people like Colin across the UK? That will be the test for innovation, because we've learned that the track is outperforming expectations. So the next stage is, okay, let's test the track with a conventional tram. So in talks with Transport for West Midlands, and that's why I have a dual role as well, to make those connections at the regional level. Unfortunately, people are embracing the technology, as Sophie said. Some things that we've discovered are now being trialled on operational sites, but we're going to put some of this track form in Wednesbury Depot, in Siding 7, to test it with a conventional tram. And then we are trying to work with Sheffield to see if they will trial it in their in a live operational site. And I was hoping Melanie would be here today, but I'm talking to her team, and the challenge will be, the what if. Everybody asks, well, what if it fails? Who's going to pay? Where does the risk sit? So can we overcome those barriers? And that will be the test for this innovation. Commercialising it and taking it forward, because it's finding those directors that know their stuff, the civil engineers and the mechanical engineers that can try and willing to try new technology in live environments. Yeah. So
it feels, even as we're just talking now, it feels like the light rail market is just intrinsically more collaborative and more willing to innovate. Yeah. And face up to what those risks might be up front and mitigate against them, with that safety overriding and cutting through everything. We've also got an increased, I'd argue, a more complex set of stakeholders. So for example, just against your name, Sophie, I have got WMRME, WMCA, TFWM and WMM. So each of our different geographies. So I live in Sheffield, so I travel on Supertram. And with devolution and the role of the metro mayors, or with separate governments, devolved governments, how is that complexity of stakeholder supporting or challenging that innovation and that collaboration that is just natural to us? And how would you see that as well as a supplier into those systems?
I think If I can just touch on the previous point around innovation
Yeah.
as well, because I think it's really important. I think when we look at rail as a whole and our, the safety critical nature of rail, introducing innovation has never been easy. It's always been tough. I like to think we've proven ourselves through our other experiences about how we do introduce innovation. But I'll also like where the ideas come from. They sort of come from two angles. One, we see the great examples that we see in the local areas, and I think Cardiff with the Very Light Tram is a wonderful example of that. But more typically what we see, it's around the supply chain with their products and their solutions and how they evolve. And that's where these partnerships are really important. We invest millions of pounds in those innovations, but we need to make sure that we're spending the money in the right areas. So we really need to understand the problem cases, the user cases, so then we can help address those and make those trams more efficient. I think in terms of the stakeholders, I find that quite tough in light rail, and I think that's something that we would like to try and work on a little bit more. We're always going to get better benefit and offer better value for money if we can see more common approaches, more standardisation, a common view. And if we understood collectively as a market what the challenges were and where the innovations need to be, we can really then focus in on those. So there's some wonderful groups that help with that.
Yeah.
If we would love to see more in that space, and Siemens would want to support that.
It's like harnessing the power of UK Tram, for example.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sharing that best
Yeah.
practice. Okay. I was going to go on to ask as well, so I lost my train of thought there. That's a really, really bad pun. I was going to ask as well in relation to the fact that you're so close to your customer. Do you think that affects how you deliver?
Is that for me?
Anybody. So the three of you, if you think of the heavy rail system, you get on the train and then that's it, isn't it? Because you've got line of sight, because you're travelling in and around people walking and wheeling, the part of the private vehicle, you're closer to your customer, but you're closer to other modes of transport.
Yeah.
How does that affect you in delivering and designing the thing that's best for your population?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right there when you say close to your customer. I mean, we've currently still got conductors on our trams, although we are moving to off-tram ticketing. But you are that integral part. So you'll have your regular customers every day where your teams will know them, your drivers will know them, they'll wave, which is really nice because, you're serving that... your local customer base who may only be going a few stops and are regular travellers with us, where it is slightly different. But in terms of being close to the customer on a safety bit, there is that interaction on the street, on that side of things. So we obviously go through Birmingham city centre, we go through busy streets, and it's not always the case that pedestrians will be looking out for trams. So you need to think about new ways of how you can ensure. So we've been doing some work with LRSSB in terms of how we can highlight that trams are in the area, especially when you're going into new areas like you will be in Cardiff, where people are not used to seeing trams. So you really have to educate
And they're
people.
so quiet.
They are indeed. So you have to educate people as to, for their own awareness, to be aware that trams are now operating in new sections. So how to we call it tram etiquette and stuff. Even when people are boarding trams and they've never done it before, and they're pressing the buttons and which doors, and the doors are closing, and so we have to educate, and we do a lot at West Midlands Metro. We do a lot with other systems to look at best practice and how we can make sure people who are living in areas where we're serving, that they're fully aware and know how to use and be aware of trams, but equally do a lot with tram drivers. There is a lot on tram drivers in terms of how we train them. I mean, we have driver simulators as well, so we will throw in scenarios on our driver simulators to get people trained to see, something might just pop out of the blue, or different weather conditions as well, which obviously affect how people will need to drive. So we do all of that, and a good focus on training and a good focus on educating the public on being in an environment where we have got trams operating.
Thank you. I'm going to open up to the floor for questions, but before I do that, one moment, sir. We'll come to you first, but I've got a few questions for you first. So, first of all, hands up if you are already supplying into one or multiple light rail systems, if you're already in that supply chain. Okay. Hands up if you live in an area where you have a light rail system. Not whether you travel on it, if you live in one where there's one. Okay, keep your hands up, please. Okay, so you all live in an area where you have access to a light rail system. Put your hands down if you do not travel on it very regularly. Okay, I did that for your guys' benefit because it goes back to that point. Sometimes where the biggest impact of light rail is where people don't have that choice, or where you guys are making it the best choice. So, questions from the floor, please, and then I'll come back with a closing question for you all. Sir, so when you get the microphone, if you introduce yourself, please.
My name's Nigel Taylor. As well as working in the rail industry most of my life, I'm now a Hertfordshire County Councillor. Hertfordshire desperately needs east-west public transport. Yet, if you talk to any of the officers, their approach is, we want a bus because railways are too expensive. What are you doing to convince local and national government that light rail is affordable and it's a better solution than putting more tarmac down?
Would anybody like
I
to
would
take
like
that
to
one? I
answer
thought
that.
you might.
It's a tough one. It is a tough gig. I mean, we're delivering innovation and trials at the moment. And just back on the previous point, I wanted to say, you know, you answered that question really well. But what we're selling to the public is a demonstrator. It's a really hard sell because they're not actually getting a service at the end of it. And there's a lot to do to change what's happening at central government to support innovation and drive down the cost. But so we work with campaigning bodies, I guess you'd call them, like Campaign for Better Transport or Create Streets. Those forward-thinking organisations that know what needs to change in regulations and policies to enable cities to consider alternative transport choices. Through our work with Create Streets, we actually got a meeting at number 10 on the 3rd of June. I got the opportunity to go and speak to the Transport and Infrastructure Advisor to the PM. So that was a great opportunity for us. We went down, we had civil servants in the room, Treasury, DFT, Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government, as well as Lord Peter Hendy, the Rail Minister. So it was a great opportunity for us to say, you know, look, we're innovating, we're driving down the cost and time of construction, we're delivering a system that's affordable for smaller cities, but we could end up in a position where we've got the innovation and the products, but actually the processes will slow it down, the bureaucracy around the Transport Works Act order, the NERSWA, the way you deal with utilities, they hold the upper hand in terms of charging the transport provider for moving their assets, which our product, the track form, you should be able to leave the majority of utilities in situ. But, you know, there's those sorts of challenges. So the government have just announced a task force, which quietly in the background, we've been asking for a task force for a couple of years now. Now it's been announced that there will be one, and we're seeing who can feed into that. But like Create Streets are on it, UTG, Jason Prince, you know, as well as industry like Arup are on it. It's being chaired by Bridget Rosewell. So the change is happening, but it's slow, but it is happening. And hopefully through Transport for West Midlands, we can feed into that and make our asks known, and hopefully over time things will change. But it is difficult, it is slow. And there's nobody that wants to deliver quicker than us.
I'm going to take a chair's privilege and jump in myself there as well. There is, over all the industry events I've been going to over the last year even, there is that shift in how do we actually assess the value of these integrated transport systems. It can't just be about that very, very short, shuttered, what's the return on investment. We've got to look beyond just a session I was at previously. So look at the long-term plan. What's the long-term return? What's the long-term benefit? It's getting people to work. It's getting people to travel to places, just socialise in ways they might not normally. And I wanted to bring you in on that point, Ron, with the Valley Lines. How have the Valley Lines changed lives for people?
So, well, in short, we've had 20% increase in passenger numbers since the change that we made. We've given people access to employment, to leisure. We've increased house prices, the value of the houses they live in. So it's had a great benefit, and will continue to do so as it develops. I think so there's a few points that have been mentioned and discussed in answer to that question earlier. The thing for me is moving to regional planning or kind of regional strategic approach is a sensible and a good thing, because you'll get a lot of noise, a lot of effort, and a lot of momentum from the local individuals who want something to happen in their backyard. So that, in my head, that's a great thing, and that's happening in Wales. It's happening in Bristol. It's happening all over the UK, Manchester. The thing that TfW are doing, and we're just kind of embarking into this now, and again it was mentioned earlier, is we're moving into bus franchising as well. So we're looking at the entire transport solution across all of Wales. So some of that is in Cardiff, or in the bigger cities, Cardiff, Swansea, Newport. Some of that is in the middle of very rural Wales, and there is a different solution for lots of different locations. Having a regional approach enables you to look at that entire transport portfolio and get the right answer to that question. So the right answer may well be a tram for the scenario you're talking about. I completely agree. But I think it needs a whole transport view of it from a regional kind of leadership. And then just to go back on the point of what are we doing to kind of demonstrate that, we are trying to put pounds in the ground and actually deliver something so that you can see a tangible benefit. You can see the sparks effect. You can see the increase in the number of people who use it, and therefore the revenue. But it's done in a sensible and responsible fashion from a kind of pricing of the ticket point of view.
Thank you. Questions from the floor? Did you have one, sir? There's a gentleman here, and then there's a gentleman over there, please. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Linus Kuncevic, Head of Civils for East West Rail. And my question is really in regards to looking at maintenance considerations. A prime example of this would be the approach of the tram heading into Birmingham New Street. Initially, when that tram track was laid down, you had beautiful granite cobblestones lining the track, looking very, very nice. And then, albeit 2 or 3 years later, I believe the rails were wearing in the wrong way, or the track form wasn't laid properly. All of that granite was subsequently ripped out and replaced with tarmac with blacktop, which is far less desirable, but that was thousands of pounds worth of waste. And had there been consideration from an end-to-end consideration, as you should be doing via CDM regs, a modular form of construction or something like that could have alleviated or prevented that waste. What lessons learned are being taken forward to prevent such wastage going forward? And what maintenance considerations are being thought about from a MMC point of view or a modular point of view, taking into account that we've got the latest PAS coming out on productivization and looking how to get that productivity really working properly.
And MMC is a massive consideration for East West Rail as well, isn't it? Okay, over to you guys.
I mean, obviously I'm not the designer in the construction arm, but these are really valid points, what you raise for someone who's the operator, because when people put in really expensive, nice granite and things like that, as the maintainer in the future, obviously that has life, but there are other products what maybe don't but come at an extreme cost. It can be difficult then when you are building your cases for this and looking at your ongoing revenue costs to maintain those systems, which become alarming to people if they think they're the cost. So we will always be looking for efficiency and how we can get the cost as low as possible, but still deliver a good product for the customer. So there is that aspect. So our early operator engagement is what I would always say into the design process as well. So we can feed into the maintenance, because you can get, you know, lovely designers who want to build your world-class systems, which you're then left what you can't afford to keep it going in the future. So definitely one of the lessons learned is really getting that earlier operator engagement in that design process. And, you know, we can bring a lot of benefits to that, other than just saving costs, but just in terms of other safety benefits and things like that, where we have experience, so we know what it's like on the ground, and we can bring that to the table. So I think that's one of the key things which I would say to that point.
Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, I'd agree. Operator and maintainer engaged as early as possible in the design process to make sure that it's sensible. I used the word common sense earlier. It's the same here. You need to apply common sense to it. So, you know, precast units that you can swap out if you need to, panels that you can install and lift fairly easily, that type of thing. It needs to be part of the thought process, and generally it is. In some extreme cases it isn't, or it perhaps wasn't considered as well as it could be. I mean, we've probably all, anyone who's built a project has built something that wasn't quite as it should have been, and you learn from every single mistake that you make. So I think all of that wealth of knowledge is in the industry, and it's being shared by the industry to then avoid a repeat of that.
I think, sorry.
Yeah, I think it's a really important question. We need to make sure that we're not just always thinking about the sort of the capital expenditure of these programs. It's the sort of the whole life cost and the operational of them. I think from a supply chain point of view, where we try and add that value is in terms of things like our ability to predict where there may be an issue in the future. An example, we've got radios which can identify where track defects are beginning to appear, and therefore we can intervene with those because before they've caused an outage and therefore disrupted our passengers, and we start losing confidence in the services. So I think actually it's a complete holistic approach, even modelling scenarios. So I think using our digital reference systems, what we've been doing a lot of now is saying sometimes things do go wrong. But actually, how does the system behave? How do we recover that network? How do we get back to a normal timetable operation as quickly as possible? And if we've sort of rehearsed all of those scenarios, we can help the operator and the maintainer make really good decisions.
Thank you. Sophie, you were going to add?
Yeah, I was only going to say the other point, but to balance against that, you still want a nice finish and a nice product. So taking Birmingham City Centre, you know, the council are very keen to have a certain look. So sometimes you'll have the pressures, as you'll know from political pressures as well, that, you know, this needs to look fantastic, we're building a place here, we want people to visit it. So it's getting that balance right between ensuring, yes, it will look fantastic for the public in a nice new area, but also thinking about the maintenance. But they are the challenges, I suppose, you face. I mean, the one thing what's special about the West Midlands is that we are the only tram system in the UK which has battery-operated vehicles, and part of that was against the backdrop of not putting overhead line and catenary connected to nice old buildings in Birmingham city centre like the town hall and so on. So anyone who travels in Birmingham will know at the back of Grand Central we will pan down and run on battery up to Broad Street, and it does look quite pleasant. And again, that's where you balance some of those aesthetic looks against the other costs.
Thank you. I think there's a question over there.
Thanks very much. Terry O'Neill, Ramboll. Thanks very much for all your thoughts and contributions. Can I just come back to the previous conversation around the task force? Nicola, you mentioned it, and I think you mentioned it as well in terms of the localism agenda, which is very important. Is there a risk that the task force will actually seek to reinvent the wheel when, quite frankly, there are systems already in existence in the UK, and all that will do is add delay and obfuscation to actually what you're all trying to do and do very well? But I always worry when these things are pushed up to government, they're kind of pushed into the cloud and almost left there. Any thoughts? Thank you.
Give it its full name first for anybody that doesn't. This is the Mass Transit Task Force, which has been secretariated by the Urban Transport Group. That was a mouthful.
I guess there is a risk of that. I think the task of the people on the panel and the people in the industry is to make sure that doesn't happen, and actually it's more a conversation about what is already known and how to improve on that, and how we can get wider government support to continue on the journey that you know has already been undertaken. So yeah, look, it could go in the wrong direction, but I think it is very important that we make sure we steer it so that it doesn't, and that it is all about investing in this as a future transport system, which has enormous benefits for far less cost than some of the other transport systems that we've got. So the task is on us to make sure that it does not go down that route.
Yeah, I mean, you raise a valid point, and that could happen, but I don't think we should not do things in case it doesn't yield any benefit. We have to keep driving change, pushing the back. You know, we shouldn't just accept the status quo if it's not working for us. You know, I would consider myself a disruptor. I might be a bit of a maverick. We need those people, and I would say to people, don't be afraid to challenge the status quo, because nothing would ever happen if we just stay static and don't try new technology. The world's evolving. You know, changes can happen at pace if there are the right people brought together to drive change. I accept it might be slow, but we're living in an era of devolved powers, devolving funding to local combined authorities, and with that should come the devolved powers. So we're asking for Transport Works Act order, for example, to be devolved to the mayor. The mayor should be able to, create the cities that they want for the people that they're delivering for. They know their cities best. They know that what would drive, economic investment, would enable their people to get to jobs and education, healthcare, socialise, etc., etc. So let's give power to the local mayors to make the best decisions for their citizens. It might take time, but I don't think, because it's too difficult. We put too many things on the too difficult to do, and then we do nothing, and then nothing changes, and everything takes ages. I want my children to have a good transport system in the future.
And clean air and access to.
Clean air, exactly. Yeah. I want them to be able to breathe clean air and not be at risk of awful diseases. And I want them to get to good jobs. I want them to develop skills. I would like us to work in an industry where we can upskill and create jobs and invest in the next generation of engineers and project managers, etc., etc.
We're coming to time, so I'm going to give you one closing question, but one thing that I'm reflecting on here is actually these integrated and light rail schemes, or catching a vehicle, they're actually mascots for the places that we're in. We all have a real sense of pride for where it is, where we come from, and certainly getting on a TFW train, you can tell you're on something different, and you can take the language as a case in point, but actually just from what you source on board for the onboard catering, for example. So the fact that a light rail system can feed into that sense of place and that pride of place, so there's a responsibility in all this upon all of us. So my closing question for you all is, considering that we're at a trade fair, we've got a lot of supply chain in the room, what is your ask of your direct supply chains and sub-supply chains to help you deliver light rail systems that then are more appealing and do answer that business case? What's your ask of supply chain to make light rail more appealing?
I mean, I think for light rails particularly, the main ask for us is that a lot of the suppliers are very much focused on heavy rail. So the focus is really there. And when you're so small as the industry is in the UK in terms of light rail systems, you don't always get so many people interested. I can struggle to get suppliers to do a range of things on the metro, because heavy rail's got the bigger money, they call the shots, they're the priority. But I think the ask is to work with us and understand our needs, because we can be a valuable customer. We alongside other things, what we talked about, economic benefits and taking people to work. We employ people in the local community. Just our expansion now, as we're expanding to Dudley in the West Midlands, we've taken about 30 plus staff from the from Dudley area who were unemployed, but we put them through what we call a sector-based work academy, 4 weeks of training at a college and an opportunity for an interview for a job with us. We've taken over 60 plus through that. We've offered 30 plus jobs with our system, so that, you know, we are actually bringing other tangible benefits. But going back to the supply chain element, it's really about taking us as a serious supplier and actually treating us as a serious customer, rather than just focusing on heavy rail where the money's probably mainly at.
Yeah, and to echo what Sophie's just said, imagine if you're only building one prototype. It's like, oh, no, it's too small a job. So, and, you know, me and Anthony were having this discussion in the car. We need suppliers to, it might be short-term pain for long-term gain. You know, we're prototyping, it is small at the moment, but if we get it right, the opportunity is huge. So asking suppliers to see the opportunity and perhaps invest some time and energy, and also, again, I'll go back to challenge the status quo, offer solutions, not problems. And it doesn't have to be done the way it's been done for the last 200 years. You know, I don't want to name and shame the supplier, but we've got an issue on site now, you know, that we've ripped up the road and it's poor quality, as we suspected it would be. But the answer isn't dig deeper. That flies in the face of what the project is about.
You're doing keyhole surgery. Is that something I remember from one of your presentations?
We do use that for access to utilities. So there are new innovations in the wider sector out there that we can, you know, use. But in this particular case, we're not going to dig deep, so we've got to find another solution. So we're using this GeoGrid, it's called. I'm not an engineer, by the way, but you know, the team. But it's our team that suggested that to the supplier. What I'd like to see is the supplier coming to us and saying, "Did you know about this new product on the market that strengthens the road?" You know, that's the sort of, that would be a great partnership if the suppliers were coming to us with novel ideas and a willingness to try, you know, maybe take a risk. We're a city that will try new things, so bring us your products and we'll trial them in a live environment if they're going to add value and save time and money.
Thank you.
So,
Colin.
Maybe a slightly different perspective from me in one angle, but it's great to hear that. I mean, look, Siemens, we know, is one of the largest technology companies in the world, and light rail is really, really important to us. We want to have that engagement with that market. We probably look for commonality where we can add maximum value, bring in that technology and all the things that we deliver around the world, how you can make use of them, or how we can adapt and modify them. I think Cardiff Crossrail is a great example where we look at different challenges where we're actually mixing light rail and heavy rail together, and therefore there's a real important hybrid solution which gives us the best solution for the taxpayers' money. In terms of suppliers for Siemens, I think sometimes people think when they come to a Siemens as a tier one, they're missing out people like the SMEs. Well, we have just under 1,000 suppliers in the UK, and over 600 of those are SMEs that are based in your areas and in your regions. And when we bring our supply chain together, which we do at least annually, we bring them all together, we ask them to innovate. Because we also think actually we're a brilliant enabler of taking the SMEs' ideas, and then we can be that catalyst for introducing them into larger projects and larger environments, and actually provide them a little bit of top cover and a little bit of assurance, arguably even funding to get their ideas up and running. So I think we can support it in both ways.
Thank you. And Dan?
So I think from the supply chain innovation, and again, from a personal point of view in terms of delivering what we need to do in Cardiff, it's about cost per kilometre. It is about cost per kilometre because we need a business case to stack up. So, yeah, bring the best and innovate and drive that cost down. And I think recognise that these schemes that we're all up here talking about are the gateway to much, much more. And if we get it right as an industry, we can genuinely have a massive increase in the amount of light rail that gets delivered. You know, again, talking personally, in Cardiff, we can go from one small section to covering pretty much the entire southeast of Cardiff City in a light rail system. But we've got to get it right first off. So it's really important we get it right.
I think you've just given us the perfect conclusion there. this is the gateway to so much more. So as an entity, we've got to come together, we've got to innovate, we've got to bring solutions to you, but we've got to be prepared to share that risk, innovate together, and understand that the system itself isn't just creating jobs, but the supply chain can benefit from this as well. It's win-win, I think. On that note, I would like to ask everybody to give our panellists a round of applause, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry we
you
ran
all.
a little bit late. It was
Thank you,
too
Pam.
interesting.